Hey guys, Pascal here. This week, Val interviewed both Aarons about the new stories they've been working on. The first story was from Aaron Sellers. They wrote about a new eviction prevention program that was passed by Spokane City Council. The ordinance passed by a vote of 5-2 and will create this new program by June 1st, 2026. The second story was from Aaron Hedge. Him and Luke co-wrote about two masked SPD officers who were at a healthcare workers vigil for Alex Pretti, who was killed by ICE agents. The vigil attendees thought they were ICE agents at first, up until it was confirmed that they were SPD officers. You can find relevant articles, other podcast episodes, and more on our website, rangemedia.co. Thanks for listening, and on to the show.
You're listening to KYRS Medical Lake Spokane. This is Free Range, a co-production of KYRS and Range Media. This is Aaron H., and I'm in the studio with Aaron S. and Val Osier, and we're here to talk about the news today. How you guys doing?
Oh,
It's Thursday.
Yeah.
Yeah, the week's almost up.
Yeah.
I feel like people keep asking me that question, and the only answer I can think of to answer is like something you'd find on a really stupid t-shirt or a motivational quote, like, I'm keeping on, or like,
I just learned, the keep calm and carry on saying?
Yeah.
Like, I thought it was just like a 2010s, like, poster thing.
Like a Tumblr thing.
Yeah, I thought that's what it was. But no, it is actually for during World War II, the British government made those posters that like look like that with the little crown on it to like encourage people to keep calm and carry on
during raids.
Yeah, I guess. And I was like, oh, that's really funny. And the reason why I learned that was because in our recent story about the post workers like getting that weird letter from the postmaster.
Yeah, that bit of esoteric. Yeah.
In the caption, I made a art for that story as like there's like a line of cops in a street facing like the opposite way at a riot, and then there's like a happy-go-lucky mailman like walking toward the camera, and I put in the caption, keep calm and carry on, as they say. And I was like, where did that poster come from? And so I looked it up, and it felt very perfect for the time period that we're in.
So the postal workers are carrying on
yes.
this very British sentiment during dark times.
During dark times, yes.
Interesting.
Anyways,
it's fascinating.
Thank you. So we're going to talk about your story first. Is that right? No.
Yeah, Val's going to interview us. We've had a really busy first 3 days of the week. I think Hedge and I were just running around like chickens with our heads cut off, trying to fire drill things on top of normal projects that we had planned. And so we think we figured it might be a good debrief for Val to talk to us about those projects. Mm-hmm. My brain's moving a little bit slower than my mouth,
Same.
I think.
Yeah.
Well, I think the way we talked about it before we just hopped on here is we were going to talk about Aaron's story about the new renters protections.
Yes, thank you.
In Spokane, and then we're going to talk about some cops related stories. That's both. It's kind of like there's some troubling stuff, but there's also some pretty hopeful stuff in that story. And then we're going to end with actually like a piece of like really good news that we got this week. So yeah, Val, do you want to kick it off with this eviction story?
Yeah. So, Aaron, you were at the city council meeting on Monday night when they passed this new ordinance.
I was.
How? So the ordinance is it's not an eviction moratorium. What is it?
It's an eviction prevention program is what they're calling it. They started out calling it an eviction diversion program and then changed the name of it for a reason that I'm not aware of. I think it was like better aligning it with like other references to things in code. Mm-hmm. I want to say that was the case.
Okay.
It's been in the works for a while, actually, since before their winter break. But when it first got proposed, there was some murkiness to it. Some like, if you're familiar with how the like legislative and just like the division of government, right? The city council can't necessarily tell the city administration to like use staff time or resources on any given project. They're like the purse strings, and they pass laws, but they can't tell Mayor Lisa Brown's staff that they need to like spend time on a project.
Oh, I actually didn't know that.
Yeah. So usually how it works is like the mayor wants a project or a like division or employees, and then would send that to the city council to approve. This seems to be more of a city council driven thing. The city already gets rental assistance funds. Sorry if this is jargony, but basically we already get all of these rental assistance funds that come to the city from a state program. And the city goes out to like request for proposals and then decides how to disperse those funds to a bunch of nonprofits that then help people who might be short on rent, might meet certain qualifiers for income or race or gender. And then those funds are like dispersed to them to help. This is like a thing that already existed. But this ordinance, this eviction prevention program was trying to like streamline that process, because once the money goes out to a bunch of nonprofits, like if I was about to be short on rent, I might not know who am I supposed to call to get help with this. And so it needs to direct mayoral resources, city admin resources, to creating a like website and a living list of here's where the money lives, here's where you can who you can get in contact with, like here are your resources as a renter. And yeah, so
that seems like such a basic thing that the city should already have a webpage for.
Doesn't it?
Am I not?
Well, I mean, when you think about it, there's a lot of programs that the city gets like state or federal dollars for, and we're like the pass-through point, and then all of that money gets allocated to different nonprofits that then run their programs for it, like with homelessness funding, right? You can see on the city website, city funded or owned shelters that have space, but you might not know like if the Hope House has shelter room, if it's not a bed that's funded by the city. So all that to say, there's a bunch of like complicated municipal government milieu surrounding this, and they just needed a little bit more time before winter to make sure that all of the organizational setup was together at the mayoral side. They came back from break. They were like, we've got it figured out. We're going to vote on this on Monday, and then they did.
Cool.
I'm not making this sound interesting, but it is.
It's not just like creating a web page for resources. It's more than that, right?
Right.
Okay.
So that's kind of step one. Step one is like we get this money, and we want to make it easier for people to know about it. Step two is that now it becomes the responsibility of the landlord to provide those resources to any renters in their properties at a couple of different times. When the renter first signs a lease with that landlord, basically, you might get handed a lease and some paperwork from your landlord. That sheet of resources from the city has to be in there. If you renew your lease, you have to be reminded of the resources at the time of lease renewal. If your landlord is going to raise your rent, they now have to send you a rent raise notification that gives you 3 to 6 months notice.
Is that a new part of the ordinance, or is that
got
from the
passed
old one?
in 2024 or 2025?
It was 2024.
2024. And so they already have to do that, but now when they're raising your rent, they also have to be like, and if this is going to cause an economic hardship, here's your list of resources. And an eviction process is also pretty complicated, but step one in the eviction process before a landlord would file an eviction is that they have to notify a tenant that they haven't paid their rent.
Okay.
So you get a notice of non-payment, basically, that says like, hey, you're short on rent, and if you don't pay us this rent in X amount of time, we're going to open an eviction proceeding against you. And so when a tenant is given that notification of non-payment of rent, they also have to be provided with the city resources at that point. And what this eviction prevention program does is it buys the tenant some time. So that list of resource exists. Landlords have to give it to tenants. And once you get to that non-payment of rent notice stage, when they give the resources at that point, they need to give tenants 30 days to engage in this eviction prevention program. So 30 days for the tenant to reach out, maybe find one of those resources, a nonprofit that has rental assistance funds. Because I think the goal is that, like, it is better for everybody if a tenant stays in a home. Eviction proceedings are expensive. It costs money for you to evict a tenant. It costs money for you to find a new tenant, right? Like, advertising it. And in the meantime, when you're waiting for somebody to move in, you're not making that rent money either. So it's better for everybody if you can keep a good tenant in your building. And of course, this doesn't apply to cases where a landlord is trying to evict a tenant for a reason other than non-payment of rent. So if you get convicted of a crime that you did in your apartment, like if you were, selling drugs out of your apartment, the landlord does not have to wait 30 days to evict you. If if the landlord comes in for an inspection and you've trashed a bunch of their property, they don't have to wait 30 days to do an eviction. Or if you are threatening your neighbors or threatening your landlord, they don't have to wait 30 days. But if the sole cause of you getting evicted would be, I'm short on rent this month, that is when this program kind of triggers.
How, I guess before this program, how fast was the wait period after getting that notice of non-payment?
That is a good question.
Because 30 days sounds like a pretty standard thing to me. But I guess if I was a landlord that works really hard and needs the money, I'd probably only wait like 1 or 2 weeks. But
I think it's less than that.
Okay.
And this is for the whole process, right? So when you think about an eviction, they give you a 14-day pay or vacate notice is what the WashingtonLawHelp.org is telling me. Cool. And that's like the start of a process. So evictions are actually pretty complicated. You get this notice, and then you get the landlord would have to go to court and file for a writ. And at that point, sorry, this is so boring. This is not making good radio. But basically, there are many steps on the path to eviction. And what Washington has been moving towards, and Spokane too, in the last couple of years, is to provide tenants with more resources and support throughout that process. Because a lot of times we're looking at like low income tenants. If the reason you're getting evicted is because you can't pay your rent, the odds are you can't afford a lawyer either, right? Like if you can't pay your $750 in rent or your $1,200 in rent or whatever, you definitely can't afford a lawyer. And so that makes it so that the landlord can just say, like, I'm evicting you, and you get evicted. Like, it's pretty, it can be pretty black and white. But if you have a lawyer, then all of a sudden there's all of these steps where you're, like, contesting, and then it kind of drags the process out a lot more.
And I think one of the interesting things about this is, like, you did a story kind of like, I think, fall-ish about a landlord who's an incarcerated landlord named Arlen Jordan, who you did this like really painstaking analysis of all of the evictions that he's filed against his tenants, and your data showed that when somebody has a lawyer, they're far less likely to actually like complete the eviction. Right. And that like an eviction can follow you around forever. It can make it's an awful thing to have to do. I can't imagine. Goes on your permanent record. It's traumatic. Like to come home and have the sheriff be there being like, all right, here's your trash bags. You've got 20 minutes until my deputies have to leave. Like get your stuff and get out. And then to try to find new housing, you think about getting into a new house, right? And a lot of times you're being asked to put down a deposit. You're being asked to pay for fees. Sometimes you're being asked to pay first and last rent. So it can be like, multiple thousands of dollars to get into a new house. And if you were unable to pay for 1 month's rent,
Like, are you going to have the money in the bank to move into a new place? And this is kind of the argument of tenants' rights lawyers, which is actually a relatively new thing because, tenants can't usually, or like tenants in the position of eviction can't usually afford a lawyer. Washington's done this really innovative thing where they have set aside a pool of money to pay for what is essentially like pro bono lawyers for low-income tenants. They call it a right to counsel program. You have a right to legal counsel, and these lawyers will go in and defend tenants in the case of eviction. Landlords, a lot of the landlords that I heard on Monday night who started calling themselves housing service providers, which is like my personal, it just like annoys my brain every time I hear it. It's like a rebrand. The PR major in me is like, that's not going to work. But their complaint, which on one hand, like I see where they're coming from, is that what used to be simple, my tenant didn't pay me. Now I'm going to, spend $2,000 on a lawyer to file these 2 pieces of paperwork. The tenant has no legal representation, so they are going to lose in court, and then they're going to have to pay for my lawyer's fees. That's how it usually works. So your, $750 of unpaid rent can turn into $3,000 of unpaid rent and legal fees that you now owe your landlord just to get evicted.
Jeez.
And it was a pretty quick and simple process. This is getting dragged for the landlord. Exactly. This is now getting dragged out by the fact that tenants have lawyers. And so, council members were saying this ordinance is a great deal for everybody because it keeps you out of eviction court. It keeps things cheaper. And some of the landlords were saying, like, well, the problem isn't eviction court. The problem is that tenants have lawyers now, so they're dragging it out and, like, making it cost a bunch of money.
Wow.
The fact that, like, tenants now have some ground to fight from is very troubling to these landlords.
Someone in their corner. And to be fair, there are cases where it's like, I mean, I thought the one that I covered, the Arlen Jordan case, was pretty interesting because this woman hadn't paid rent in like 4 years, right? So that's the kind of tenant that these landlords are talking about when they're like, I've got a tenant who won't pay me rent, and now this lawyer has dragged this out for 4 years, and so I'm just like, I'm not making money on that unit. I'm paying legal bills. This sucks. This is my nightmare. But on the other hand, there were tons of tenants in those buildings, this woman included, that were living in substandard conditions, and they have a right to a safe home. Like, Washington has a lot of tenant protections as to like the conditions of your building, and you have a right to that. And it is a valid defense for a lawyer to be like, actually, you don't owe rent because you weren't living in safe conditions. And I don't think that that tenants have had people in their corner like that. I don't think that landlords are used to dealing with that. And again, that is not to say that there aren't some tenants that, like, I don't want to say that everybody's an angel, but a lot of the cases that I've looked at are like, there's an Uber driver who was really sick or like in the hospital, lost out on that income for these 2 weeks, has, treated the unit well, has been a great tenant, but all of a sudden is short like $750 for rent and can't pay that. And it's like, do we want to, like, is it good for anybody for that person to be evicted? Probably. I mean, I would say no.
I mean, this is a huge reason why we have the homelessness crisis that we have in downtown Spokane, that everybody is terrified of, no matter what your political affiliation. It's a really awful situation.
And like, not to bring it back to numbers, because sometimes I feel just a little cold when I start talking about like how much something costs. But if somebody needs rent for 1 month, that can range. But let's say it's like $1,200 for rent for 1 month, and you can't pay that 1 month rent. Well, at a lot of homeless shelters, it can cost more than $100 a day per head for that shelter bed. And so, like, paying one family's rent to keep them housed, to keep them stable, is cheaper than paying for like 12 days in a shelter for one member of that family. And the math doesn't always break down quite that simply. I think the $100 a night one is something that I saw tied to the like inclement weather sheltering, like an emergency bed that has to pop up. But in general, it is just cheaper to keep people housed than it is to get people off the streets and help them completely rebuild their life from scratch.
Yeah. So one thing that came to mind earlier when you were talking about like the evictions that this ordinance does not apply to, are we thinking, or I don't know, is there any worry that
that landlords will just cite a different reason?
Yeah, like they'll like find a, you know, nail hole in the wall and be like, oh, this is all messed up now, I gotta evict you. I don't know.
I mean, I think there's always that kind of worry. And I think part of the hope is that, especially by connecting people with these resources even earlier than a non-payment of rent, like when you sign your lease, you get handed this. If you start to have issues with your landlord, tenants' rights lawyers will tell you the most effective time to meet with a client is before an eviction has even been filed. They're, you know, coming in at a disadvantage when they're dealing with an eviction that's already been filed. They want to meet with tenants earlier. So if you have an inkling that you might not be able to pay rent, or that, you know, oh, I'm going to try to engage in this program, but I'm worried that my landlord won't do it genuinely and will say that I've damaged this property and try to evict me that way. I think the hope is that now the resources have been given to you to preemptively and proactively seek out legal support.
Okay. And like, just to like go back to the like time frame of like, you know, how like tangibly this could help somebody. I know in your story, you, one of the tenants' rights lawyers mentioned a story of a woman who was like evicted, and like 7 days later she got the like rental assistance money.
Yeah.
So can you elaborate on that story, or at least what you know on it?
I think in that story, what the tenants' rights lawyers were trying to argue is that if the landlord had been forced to engage in this eviction prevention program, she would have had more time from when that non-payment of rent notice got nailed, and they would have had more time to get her that rental assistance. Like, it would buy them like an extra 2 weeks, you know, a 14-day pay or vacate, and then you get 30 days to try to figure it out. And so they're just saying, like, any little extra bit of time can be crucial for these tenants. There's 2 stories that were shared. One of them was like, we got this tenant their rental assistance 2 days before they would have been evicted, or a few days before they would have been evicted. And they're just, I think, trying to communicate that it is always a race against time. A lot of times I got coffee and had an interview with Hannah Swenson, who's the lead attorney at the Housing Justice Project, which is one of the 2 firms here in Spokane that does this right to counsel representation. And she was saying that, like, oftentimes people don't know that this is a resource that is available to them. People who meet the income threshold are supposed to be notified of it by the courts, that like you qualify for a right to counsel attorney, but sometimes that's like 18 pages deep in a 30-page packet of paperwork that is really like, the barrier to understanding that is high. People are just like, they're panicked. They're seeing like eviction. You might not go through and read like 30 pages of paper. And so these attorneys are, in some cases, having to hunt down tenants that, like, they see an eviction get filed with the court and they're like, oh, I know this tenant would have qualified. I've got to try to find them, get to them, connect with them.
See, maybe they're couch hopping.
Right. Like,
okay.
It's always just a race against time for them. And so they're saying, please give us a little bit more time and we will do our best to make sure that people either get to stay in their housing or one of the stats that I found particularly interesting with this program is that statewide, they have a 90% rate of getting their clients into or staying in permanent housing.
Wow. The lawyers do, or? Okay.
a couple of the lawyers, well, actually, Hannah was representing the tenant that was being evicted by Arlen Jordan, and she was talking to me about some of her other cases where she has represented Jordan's tenants. Like, she is one of like 2 lawyers who like takes all of these tenants that this guy has. And when that case closed, she had one other open case for a tenant that Jordan was trying to evict. And I just found out like kind of the resolution of that case, and the resolution ended up being that he didn't get to keep his housing, but she negotiated a settlement for him. So the landlord paid this guy money to leave, and basically was like, I acknowledge that the housing I provided you was substandard, and here's, you know, a check for a certain amount of money. And then Hannah's able to get that person that money so that they have a pool to like sign up for, you know, it's like $7,500.
Oh wow.
Like,
That's,
I don't remember if it was that specific case, but she's negotiated settlements for a bunch of these Jordan tenants, and some of them like were substantial amounts of money.
I mean, that's like $7,500 is enough to like.
Yeah, I saw one that was like $3,000, one that was like, I'm trying not to just make up numbers from thin air. Please acknowledge these are like approximations of what I've seen, because I'm not like scrolling through the legal documents in front of me. But essentially, that's one of the benefits of these attorneys, especially for people like the most vulnerable tenants are going to be more likely to be living in slumlord situations where maybe their landlord is taking advantage of them. Like in the Lisa Brayman case, one of the things that I found particularly interesting was that they kept telling her she owed different amounts of rent. So imagine if you show up and your landlord's like, pay me rent, and you're like, okay, here's the $800 we agreed upon, and then they're like, why are you paying me $800? I decided that it's $1,200 now. All of these different, like, you owe us X amount of money a month, and how are you as a tenant supposed to, like, obviously that should be something that's nailed down in a lease, but maybe you just don't know your housing rights. And so that's another, like, benefit of these lawyers. I feel like we just started talking about right to counsel instead of the housing.
It's all part of the bigger picture.
I think like from like a 40,000 foot like viewpoint, any leniency, I know I can speak, and I like am pretty comfortable compared to a lot of folks who like live in, you know, potentially like slumlord like situations. Like my apartment complex is managed by a large corporation out of Seattle, and they were gonna hike my rent several $100s. I can't remember the exact amount, but it was gonna be like a pretty heavy burden for me. I could have afforded it, but it was gonna be a pain. And I think it was during the last legislative session, the state enshrined some renters protections, saying they have to give you at least 6 months notice. I can't remember the exact numbers, but and then they can't. There's a cap on the amount that they can raise the rent, so they reduced the increase to like, it was less than $100 that they increased their rent, and they put it off until actually this month. And that just gave me so much more breathing room. And I'm like, I was stressed about it. I would have been able to handle it, but because I'm like a lot more comfortable and fortunate to be in that situation, that's you know, a lot better than a lot of people's situations. But it was still really stressful, and like any like little bit of breathing room that you can get in your living situation is a huge deal for people, I think. And I can't imagine like how like elevated that would be for somebody who's like in a more dire situation than what I'm in.
And like to kind of illustrate the point of like, it costs a lot of money for landlords to like do these evictions, and like it costs money for tenants if like they have to go through the proceedings. I can't remember the exact number in your Arlen Jordan story, but like you had like a figure in the story that was like, before right to counsel was like made law, he had filed like 200 some odd eviction cases, or he had won like 200 some odd eviction cases, and then after right to counsel, it was like he had only won like
30.
7.
It was 189. He had filed 189 cases before right to counsel and won 145 of those.
Okay.
And after right to counsel, he filed 33 and won 9.
Right.
There's a coded graph on Sellers' story at rangemedia.co.
Yeah. If you search rapist landlord on rangemedia.co, you can find that story.
Yeah, and I think, like, just to close it out, I do think there was 2 council members that voted no to this program, and I do think that they both brought up some valid critiques of it. Councilmember Michael Cathcart talked about how, and this kind of goes back to the thing I was rambling about at the beginning about the administration. I guess a couple years ago, under a previous council, like in the early to mid 2010s, they had tried to do something kind of similar. Like they had passed a law that was like, we want a housing navigator and we want all of these resources, but they hadn't really like coordinated with the admin, and so none of that stuff actually got implemented. So council basically passed a section of code that's like, here's how this will work, but they can't like direct staff, and so it just sort of got deprioritized. And so I think one of the things that he expressed worrying about was that like this could be sort of the same thing, like we, you know, tell the mayor to do it, and yeah, maybe like Brown does it, but you know, what if she doesn't want to, or what if we have a different mayor in a couple years? Like, how are we? And there's no funding mechanism tied to it, so it's not like they're saying like, here's $60,000, hire a housing navigator. And so he expressed some concerns that like this wasn't sustainable, and it wasn't, I don't know, like firm enough. He also talked about like not wanting to give people false hope, and I do think that there is not always going to be rental assistance money. There is a higher level of need than there is funding. And so you might get this paper that's like, here's rental assistance funds available to you, and that might all be drained. Like maybe it's December and all of the rental assistance money for the year is gone. And so he talked about that element of like false hope, and also like at that point we're still requiring landlords to wait 30 days, even if there's no chance that their tenant can get rental assistance. So that he felt like that was unfair to the landlord. I think tenants' rights lawyers would argue that even if there's no rental assistance available, one of the other resources on the sheets is like a tenants' rights lawyer, and they might be able to negotiate a compromise or a like something that works better for both of them. But it is, I think, a valid critique to say that we don't fund rental assistance at a rate that would allow everybody that needs it to get it.
So is there an enforcement mechanism for this?
I think the enforcement mechanism is just that, like, in the same way that the enforcement mechanism for the law that requires landlords to register on the rental registry before they can evict somebody, I think it's like a legal defense. If it's like I was engaged in the eviction prevention program and my landlord still tried to evict me, that's a defense that a lawyer could be like, this was an illegal eviction.
I see.
Because they were supposed to engage in this 30-day program and they didn't. So now we have a defense for why they shouldn't get evicted.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. Should we go to commercial break and then come back for Hedge? Is there any final thoughts on eviction prevention?
No, I mean, I think we covered it. It is like, I feel like it's good news that, people who are, running things in Spokane have their eye on this, and they're trying to find creative solutions. But it's also just troubling that like the resources potentially don't exist, and like it doesn't, like these programs don't necessarily work for everybody. There's strong opposition to them. It's very complicated, and I think that that's probably one of the reasons that we have such a problem in Spokane and in cities across the West. Is like this is a genuinely just impossibly complex problem.
And Washington's broke, so
Yeah.
we don't know how much money will get allocated to rental assistance. And
Isn't there a bill for that, or not rental assistance?
Are you talking about the supplemental funding for right to counsel?
Yeah.
That's the other thing that's on the table. So we've got these lawyers, right, that are, fighting for tenants across the state. There needs to be $3 million passed in the supplemental budget for this program, or they will have to dramatically reduce staff.
Wow.
So, you know.
How much is it?
$3 million.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Well, thank you for doing all of that really complicated reporting, this story back to front. We'll see what happens in coming weeks, days, years. Yeah.
All right.
Commercial break, though.
We'll be back in 4-ish.
What would my DJ name be? What would your guys' DJ names be? I'm thinking about DJ Shrimp Biscuit right now.
I'm DJ Living on the Hedge.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah. DJ Sellers.
DJ Cat Whisperer. It's the best I can come up with on short notice.
Yeah, we'll workshop it a little bit. Okay, so our next story is what Hedge was working on early this week, last week. Sometime.
Yeah, late last week / early this week. Actually, Luke was the person who got the tip on it. He's the primary writer on the story, but he's not with us today. But I was with him during that reporting, and I think I can talk about it.
Yeah. Okay. So it was about the vigil for Alex Pretti that Spokane nurses held last week, right?
Yeah, there was a march that was stood up by a bunch of healthcare workers in Spokane. They marched from Riverfront Park to the Spokane County Courthouse and held like a little demonstration. I wasn't at this event, so I can't speak to the size of it or the atmosphere or anything. But Luke, I think the day of gets a text message with a screenshot. And I don't know who texted Luke, but the screenshot showed another text thread saying that the person who sent this the text thread that's displayed in the image. I'm trying to nest this gracefully, and it's impossible. Had seen two men standing kind of at the west end of the protest, and they were wearing masks, like gator masks, and some clothing that seemed kind of in the
Timu
in the realm of this
the Ice Chud vibe.
Yeah, just it's like semi-tactical, there's big pockets,
gray hoodie,
and,
big vest situation.
Exactly. And this person who turns out to be Jim Leedy, who's basically I think my stories have become the Jim Leedy show. He was in the lead of my last 3 stories that I have a byline on. But it's just he just so happens to be involved in all the stories in Spokane. He had seen these guys and he called up the Spokane Police Department's dialogue team, which is kind of this new unit that Spokane Police stood up, I believe, kind of in the wake of the June 11th protests. Basically, what these folks do is they're police officers. They're charged with monitoring large public events and making sure that they don't get out of hand. If there's an unsafe situation, they'll approach whoever's involved and say we respect your right to be here. We want you to exercise your freedom of speech. But this behavior that you're doing, you gotta cut that out. They also work very closely with event organizers to make sure that they monitor the events for safety. So Jim calls this team, and they quickly figure out that the two men, because Jim had figured these guys are ICE officers, because we've seen them across the country in these masks, the same garb. It's kind of referred to as mockingly as tactical.
I thought it was Timu tactical.
I think that's another one, but it's he thinks they're ICE officers because that's what we've come to know ICE officers to be across the country. We've seen, if you paid any attention to social media and the news, you see
That's sarcastic.
Yeah,
you see these guys dress in very similar garb, and they'll often be doing pretty violent things to the people that they're interacting with, whether and they're supposed to be enforcing immigration law, but they're also arresting civilians. Jim thinks they're ICE. He calls up the dialogue team and says there's these two guys here in gator masks, and describes their clothing, and
they had like police radios, right?
You're jumping ahead, I think.
Oh, sorry.
I don't know
JK.
if and that's not totally clear. We don't know exactly how these guys received the word, but the dialogue team figures out that these two guys are Spokane police officers.
Not ICE.
They are not ICE. Which is strange because, Val, you and Luke had a very prominent exclusive interview with Police Chief Kevin Hall not too long, several weeks after the June 11th protests. We had a lot of questions about how police were interacting with the public in this kind of like milieu of immigration enforcement, pretty heavy like street protests. And he told you guys, he said, my officers will not wear masks. They will not. It was like very like he was. I mean, we've seen the word unequivocal like be used to describe this, and so it was surprising to us that these two officers were there wearing masks. Very quickly, the dialogue team made sure that these guys got the word to leave the scene immediately. They're not allowed to be there. They were on duty.
We got that confirmed?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. City spokesperson Aaron Hutt let us know that they were on duty. Wow. And that was implied in Chief Hall's comments about it. So Luke gets this text, right? And so we start reporting on it. We think it's a story. And there's a lot of like kind of like twists and turns in the reporting of this story, but I reach out to the police spokesperson Daniel Strassenberg, and I copy Chief Hall on it, and I say like, we're going to write a story about this thing that happened at this event, and Strassenberg writes me back and says Chief Hall is out of town until Monday afternoon. That was on Thursday that I reached out to him, and so about midday on Monday, I start drafting an email to Strassenberg and Chief Hall, just saying like, okay, it's almost Monday afternoon. Is there a time that I can chat with Chief Hall? And as I'm typing this email, I think it was in the Slack conversation. Aaron Sellers was listening to the Public Safety Committee meeting of the city of Spokane, and Chief Hall kind of it's right at the beginning of the meeting, right? Pretty
early on. Like I think they do like two things, and then Chief Hall comes to give his like.
Tell us what happened.
Well, he just at every public safety committee they do a report where it's like, here's what's been going on for the cops this month. He was talking about like violent crime statistics, which are going down, so that's cool. Everything except rape, which is not going down. Yeah, it's something they're looking into because like national violent crimes have been going down, and so he said that they're trying to do some data. Anyways, that's a digression.
Yeah, sorry.
Data analysis on like how Spokane's violent crime compares to the state or the state and the country.
But this is just part of like a normal
report. He does, like, crime rates. Here's how many homeless people we arrested this month for being homeless in public. Here's how many we were able to navigate into treatment. And then he jumps into like, I don't remember, it was like kind of a weird segue about how when they get things wrong, like they will get things wrong, but they're going to like take responsibility for it, basically. And then he is like, and that brings me to, I want to own up to something that happened last week. He said, I just want to remind everybody, and I know this council knows this, is that we're all human beings. The officers are human beings. Mistakes will be made, and we'll address those mistakes when they're made. Last Wednesday, a mistake was made at a public demonstration where we had plainclothes officers in the demonstration wearing masks. They were seen, they were identified. I'll take full accountability for that. I didn't know the officers were there. The incident commander didn't know the officers were there. That communication gap is my responsibility, so I take that. It won't happen again. We made it very clear to every single member of the police department, all 454 of them, what the expectations are when it comes to wearing face coverings and whether you're going to be part of the operational plan on a demonstration or a public protest or a First Amendment protected activity. So we make mistakes and we rectify them. That was what he said at the meeting.
So
scooped us.
the beans are spilled before we can get our story out, and we've done at this point we've done some pretty we have the story nailed. We have all the details we need. We just don't have a statement from the police, which we get from this. But unfortunately, the spokesman was tuned into this meeting as well, and they got a story up pretty quick just based on Chief Hall's comments. Luke and I had a lot more information and detail because we'd been working with sources who were there and watched it happen. And it took us longer to write our story, and the spokesman scooped us.
It's fine.
What's that?
It's fine. I mean, I feel like
I think
scooping it, like the idea of scooping is such an old school like journalism thing. Like with the internet, it's like it doesn't really matter if you're first. Sometimes it's actually better. And I'm not just saying this to make you feel better, but in terms of like...
As journalists, we do not like not being first.
I know. But
especially when we had the story last week.
Yeah, and I probably could have worked a little faster than I did on it, but...
I mean, and I'm not saying this just to make you feel better, but like sometimes it actually is better to be second. Because the way that like SEO and like social media algorithms will like order it, it's like the first news outlet like gets it out there, but then like the following story is like blows up, you know? So sometimes it works out in your favor.
I take it as a positive in that like some communities have no reporters who are paying attention.
Yes, that
like
too.
some communities have no reporters who are able to attend these sort of public meetings where no votes taking place, you know? And at this one there was multiple, and we all heard him say it, and everybody was like, oh man, we got to do the news. And it's cool that there are reporters who are paying attention.
You guys are being very sweet to me, and I appreciate it.
And
I still wanted to be free.
Yeah, the consolation prizes are consolations for a reason.
But I think, that's all just like inside journalism baseball. But like, I think to me, it seems like the spokesman did a big feature over the summer on this dialogue team. And I think that it seems to be like working as intended, even when there are officers within the police department who don't seem bought into some of the really like positive reforms that Chief Hall, who's been in the position for a little more than a year.
That's like an interesting story of like this like growing rift, or I don't know.
I mean, it's not the first time. Like after the June 11th protests, a conservative news outlet broke that Hall had told his officers not to turn over data to the FBI, and one of them did anyways.
I mean, I think it's interesting. I mean, there's like 400 some odd people like employed by the police department, or at least officers. I'm not sure. And I think it's interesting that not all of them, I guess, like their leader or like are aligned with their leader. But
I mean, it's a big complex organization with hierarchies and
and I'm sure
like
that's
existing
like
and inertia and like
always the case, because the chief is a position that's hired by whatever mayor is in office. So, you know, if the politics of the mayor's office change, that dramatically shifts the direction people are getting from.
If any insiders of the police department want to talk to us, we are on Signal and Proton Mail. We'd love to talk to you. Sorry.
What was your big takeaway from this story, Hedge? Like, where do you think things go from here? Like, how much did this burn community trust? Do you believe Hall when he says people aren't going to do it in the future? What do you think people should like expect?
I mean, Hall said, one of the interesting things that Hall said in his, he issued a statement to some reporters, including us, saying that the officers were wearing masks because it was cold, which seemed strange to me. That
I'm a knitter. I can knit you guys some scarves.
I wasn't there. The temperature wasn't dramatically. It's been a lot colder this winter than it was on Wednesday.
I thought it. Oh wait, maybe I'm thinking about the other vigil. Never mind, because the vigil before for Renee Good, that is that one day that actually snowed a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think so.
I'm doing a different one.
Well,
in my head.
I mean, like it's it's nuanced. My big takeaway is I think it's good that the dialogue team is working as intended, and they're trying to keep the temperature down, and that Chief Hall is acknowledged. He took full responsibility for the issue and identified it as a problem. He called it a mistake, and I think that's a positive thing. Yeah,
it was 38 degrees last Wednesday.
It's a bit chilly.
I don't wear a face mask when it's 38 degrees, but
No.
I don't know, maybe. But we also
Oh yeah, we wanted to end on good
we
news.
promised our listeners that
two pieces of good news.
We've got 2 minutes for these 2 pieces of really good news.
Okay, good news number 1. In 2025, the Spokane Police Department didn't kill anybody.
What?
I think for the last couple of years, people have been citing statistics that per capita, SPD has been one of the top 10 deadliest police forces.
Wait, they didn't kill anybody in 2025?
They didn't kill a single person in 2025.
Good job, guys.
They used deadly force against 2 people, so that is what they classify it when an officer essentially uses a gun, uses a gun, is what they classify it as.
Oh, in 2024?
2025.
Oh.
But it didn't kill either of the... So, if you shoot somebody in the leg, that's still a use of deadly force. But both of the 2 people they shot, which were both white men, survived. So, in 2025, they didn't kill anybody. And I think that we should celebrate any time that we have 0 victims of fatal state violence in a year.
I want to make a graphic for this.
It's really important because Spokane has consistently ranked in the top 10 deadliest police departments in the United States. And last year, which is Chief Hall's first full year, is definitely an outlier in that.
I want to make a picture that says days without killing somebody. Okay, sorry.
Stop giggling.
I'm sorry. It's really sad.
Anyways, so that's good news. The other good news is that, we've been talking about the June 11th protests, and the thing that kicked off the June 11th protest is that 2 young men were detained by ICE. These 2 young men were here in the United States legally. They had come on a humanitarian parole program, and they came in for what they were told was just regular check-ins, and were detained at those check-ins. And one of those young men's guardians, Ben Stucker, put out a call that ultimately ended up with people protesting for their release. 7 months later, one of those men has been released from the Tacoma Detention Center. And not only was he released, but he was released because a judge found that his Fifth Amendment rights to due process were violated by the Department of Homeland Security when they detained him.
That's I'm still pretty interested if that will have any bearing on other cases.
I think this is sort of happening in other places.
Yeah.
I saw a case that was similar to this out of Texas yesterday. But yeah, I think it's good news because it is a confirmation that what happened that day was wrong, that these 2 men should not have been detained.
And that some of the checks and balances that are enshrined in our government are still working.
He still did have to spend 7 full months in a detention facility where there has been a tuberculosis outbreak, where people are alleging that the conditions are pretty horrible.
They're paid $1 a day or less than $1 a day to work.
Not anymore.
Oh, really?
But
sorry.
we do have to close out.
On that note, on that good news note,
Yay.
complicated but good news, we're closing out. See y'all next week.